There are other elites just as smart, or at least darn well close to Elon, that could motivate techniques for a quantum age. But there are not many that pro-enact through what him and I have, and a certain Kennedy to actually putting it together. There are many beings as well out here, including Starseeds, that don't even know how to access the points of events yet, and still have that choice or chance to. And this is that time for them to open that up. If you are scared to do it and you have a certain technique, do not be. Move forward with that. There's a reason. This timeline has an open conjuncture for a lot of soul keepers to bring forward a better age. Not just one, not just two. There are numerous amounts of techniques that can be spread out there to motivate many.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 28. Blue, how are you?
I'm good today, Mike.
Excellent. I know we got a big show planned for episode 28. What are we going to talk about today?
Well, one of the main things we'll be talking about here in this episode is shamans and otherworldly powers. Inadvertently, these powers that equalize them on a higher substandard from others, the indigenous Native Americans, as well as certain tribes itself, or certain other activation codes of effect that have substantially retrieved over time, had given through weather manipulation zones, through certain aerodynamic speeds granted from spiritual leaders, as well as maintaining the balancing status of where they had gotten these formulations from.
Wow, that sounds like a lot to talk about today. I am excited to talk about shamans and some of the other things we might talk about today as well. But before we get started, folks, I appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you listening. Please make sure you click on subscribe and like and click on the notifications wherever you're receiving this information. And of course, if we're not in your favorite spot where you get your stuff, let us know and we'll get on that platform as soon as we can. Blue, let's go ahead and kick it off. Wait, the floor is yours. Whichever topic you want to talk about first.
Mongols. Mongols are part of the shamans, dealing with who have possessed weather manipulations. They were one of them. They had learned through that activation code. There was also the Amazonians, who had a possession and could choose a powerful brew to travel around in the Aether's dimensions. This powerful brew actually casts a higher dimensional plateau upon the persons or persons itself, and it can pull them into a major astral projection leeway point, as well as the Kalahari Desert, dealing with the Sun Bushmen. They as well dealt with trance dances. These types of dances elevate and unlock supernatural abilities in healers itself.
You know, I've been to a lot of concerts and festivals and events. I've never been to one of them EDM type things. And this shaman trance dance sounds a little bit like a EDM type thing. Would that be a modern day version of that?
All these types of abilities that they have gotten, these higher codes, they received from replicated sources from other realms. The ancient Native American tribes, or even others like these, that had certain points of events where they had simulated something more than others. They had accessed that from a different type of replicated speed than their own. It had motivated and be able to move them forward through whatever tribe or activation code they had actually pushed into. Yes, like the sun gods, the star beings. These tribes, they had received a certain points of effect from them. They have to receive certain points of effect and stabilize to their own DNA formulation codes and allow people approval for maintaining through that throughout the generations itself. That's why they had said that some humans, they had possessed certain abilities and are trying to figure out. They have seen it through cave paintings. They've seen it through other walls, fortifying speeds, and documentations of receiving these extra benefits, but not really understanding why and how these tribes had received it in the first place.
You know, we've talked about indigenous peoples, you know, in other parts of the world and all over the world, and here, you know, in this country here, the Native Americans, and we've talked about a lot of similarities, sounds like, with the shaman, because of course there was a medicine man, and they would do a rain dance when he needed it to rain. So this isn't by just sheer coincidence. This is just the way things were done, or this was same peoples in different parts of the globe.
They were gifted this from the higher beings. Just like it was pronounced on one of the other shows that I had talked about, how one had landed on the realm. And I believe it was one of the valleys or mountains areas around here in the USA sector that it dealt with. And it had certain gifts, this being, and it had granted these people certain gifts, this tribe, these certain gifts that it had replicated from. Other timelines, other dimensions have humanoid project speeds or advanced humanoid replication codes that can be granted onto the percival effects of mankind here. Because the percival effects on mankind here have a hyper inlaid speed that is able to access these codes and unlock them.
When we talk about shaman, is it possible there's still practicing shaman in the world today? Real. I'm not just talking a gimmick. I'm talking real.
Yes. Certain ancient tribes that still fortify their processing speeds nowadays. There are not many. Do have that. They do possess that. It's an ancient thing that pro enacts through what their tribe and or tribes have been gifted from other sources. And they feel that that gift from other sources would be the same thing as a Christian would feel from God itself, or someone else would feel just as a given that would be a better motivator and a flow from the forces of life, maintaining its distribution scheme. They find that it is very sacred to hold on to these gifts. They find that it's sacred to not let go of that, because most humans nowadays, they don't even know how to heal. Self-healing is a generative mode, and energetic healing is a generative mode that anyone can access. Anyone can pull outwards.
Wow,
but I find it quite interesting. I find that quite interesting. Upload speed to do it.
Wow, so it's just like we've talked about in the past. We have a lot of unused area in our brains. So that sounds like something that if you can access that, how would somebody access that? Is there a certain frequency they listen to, or how's that work?
You got to be thinking about divine prophetics. One of the last shows I had announced about a divine prophetics and stabilizing a healing device within your own being, maintained through churches. How pastors they thought they had gifted from God itself. They were given these gifts and thinking that God's healing them through them. But on a higher span of wave of things, they unlocked those gifts in the forces of life itself. That's why you feel heat surging through your body. If you ever do go to church, and some people, they really do get blessed. You're going to be gifted and granted certain replication speeds. Don't think that it's just God going through you. You are being granted these levels of effect.
Wow. That sounds like a lot to think about. I'm going to have to digest that some more. I'll probably have more questions for you next week, even on that. That's a deep one for us. What's going on with our friend Elon Musk and Starlink and SpaceX and Boring? What's going on?
Well, the Boring Company currently that has been, I believe, since 2016 or before, maintaining distribution scenes underneath the planet itself in correlation. It's an extension perimeters to be able to save on a better grace for mankind in an aerostream defense line. Maintaining that the calibration speeds be motivated better so they're dealing with better octane events when they're moving around. So centralized tube index systems instead of train fortifying speeds that will pretty much derail and cause so many problems. Manualization processing speeds that will be able to take you from one excitation to the other without problems on the perimeters of the up above, because the certain Biden administration right now causing so many problems tearing it up. Now, these centralized tube systems start from one parking lot and generated across the realm itself, and hopefully with the outer and open extension perimeters can maintain better stability up on top if a stability can be obtained downstairs. Then meaning we can actually start motivating and fixing what humans have, or the generic beings mainly, have caused so much destruction upon. We've got to make a motivator around the defamation points that are being caused here.
You know, we've talked briefly about these things back in episode 13. We talked about boring and projects he was doing under South Florida, believe it or not, and Vegas. And then in episode 20, we talked about the possibility of an Aqua tube. I want to put a visual out there to make sure that I'm understanding correctly, and that our listeners and people watching can understand. We're basically talking like a system, kind of like a pneumatic tube at a bank when you go through the drive-through, if you still do that anymore, where it and shoots that little car up in there and then they shoot it back. That's what we're talking about, but on a larger scale, right?
Yes, very similar to that processing speed itself. And there also goes, until the actual formality and revation effect to be maintained and the stability. So mankind will soon have hyper teleportation module defense grids that can move them from one Aqua level to another instantaneously, or indexer effects on a centralized anti-polarity pod system. Until both of those be indexed, humans will most likely go into Tesla itself, like they already are, in maintaining vehicle fortifying speeds, at least either on two wheels, and the next indexer speed most likely would put on an anti-polarity gravity or electron interface, that the fields or the electrical fields itself be stabilized upon the vehicle's forerunning speeds in the actual underground fortification zones itself. So between those and the stability that prolonged with the tube systems, the activity would create a lot less friction than what's being indicated currently on the upstreams here.
So we're talking about high speed stuff all over the place, where it's, I mean, it's literally like a high speed way to travel now. Is that what we're saying, like supersonic?
Well, for the tube systems, yes. For the centralized lower systems, like the car module frames, which only a Percival would have to be a lot less than it is now, and maintain better, run through at two different speed lanes. You got to think of the zoning lanes currently, what they have cars for now. And the zoning lanes that could deal with the other Percival effects. But the main thing to move between one to the other would be the aeronautical tube system. That is the main distribution point that would hold a better process instead of all of this negative spans up here. So yes, the main part would be the aerodynamic tube system.
You know, when I was a child, I lived in the Northeast, and when we were like in New Jersey or going to New York or what have you, we took the Holland Tunnel. You would take a tunnel, and I thought that was the coolest thing, going in a tunnel. You know, here we are in our car and we're underneath the water. You know, I thought that was the coolest thing. So we're talking about these systems you're talking about are not only underground, but they're underwater as well, right?
Well, that would be closer to an Aqua line on an extension code for the water. So you're seeing the whole perimeters. When you're underground, you're fortifying speeds like in the actual tube system itself. You're not going to see what's on the outside when you're moving that high speed underground. Because it's in close quarters when you're going from one aerodynamic wave to the other. The other, you're extending along the floor of the ocean bottom. So that way you're able to see the transitory effect from up above.
Would this be a system or a way, or maybe there's an alternate system very similar to this, to gain you access to Agartha and the inner realms that we've talked about?
Well, the tube systems would extend into that, and higher and lower elevation shafts into that processing speed. But that's not an access point that won't be designated for quite a while. At least everything else is actually maintained better here.
I find that curious that, one of the leaders that will be assisting in this process through Boring Company, again, is Elon Musk. It seems you can't go a show without talking about Elon Musk. So I'm convinced even more that he himself is, from some other place, some other time, some other dimension, and or he's been gifted certain abilities or certain knowledge, whether that's through the government or not. These technologies and these abilities to stay on the forefront of everything. And I still hope he wins his fight against Zuckerberg, if that's still really a thing. Do you find it curious that we always come back to Musk? It's like everything we talk about always comes back to Musk. Do you find that curious at all?
No, I find the substantial abilities that he has that could progress for something good if maintained right. And the thought formational codes could hopefully put in better progress here than what they are currently placing. A lot of the leaders, actually. And we're talking about the ones that do not make the right decisions. They themselves better start.
We talked in the past about AI, and we've had our czar of artificial intelligence, up in the VP of this country, if that's what you want to call her. Anyway, I call her the vice resident because I think the Brandon there is a resident. He's not the president, and she's the vice resident then. But she was nice. In the last week, she went out and told the public that artificial intelligence is 2 words. AI is 2 words.
And I think the first part of this issue that should be articulated is AI is kind of a fancy thing. First of all, it's 2 letters. It means artificial intelligence.
That's who we have running things. I mean, it's kind of ironic. We're talking artificial intelligence, but we've been talking about Musk, and he's got this XAI situation going on. Tell me more about that and how that's different than what we may have seen already.
Well, XAI, Open AI, is a simulation code of what's being generated through the Starseeds and the humanization process of accessing the outer cosmic realms and the knowledge of the containment code for it itself. XAI OpenAI is an outer extension perimeters to Starlink accessing points, as well as maintaining better graces for the borders of mankind itself, advancing the outer quantum curricular scale and the motivational techniques of what can be processed through a Neuralink standard node. Elon did speak out in one of his transactions recently, and it had a replicated picture of events that he is one of us. He is a higher being. He has motivations to maintaining something better and saving the grace for mankind. There are certain beings here that were gifted this implementation devices for a reason. They were gifted the knowledge for a reason. So with the reasons why he had even opened up the perimeter of what humans would call it artificial intelligence, but to others we are going to call it advanced intelligence, is to motivating the mind forward and maybe seeing if there is something we can do instead of being stuck in a bubble.
The whole thing's fascinating to me with Musk. We talked about him with the Neuralink, and it was interesting to me we've been talking about that technology. We've been talking about Musk. We've been talking about artificial intelligence. There's a series on Netflix that I've started watching because I heard good things. It's called Black Mirror, and I do recommend it if anybody, is looking for something to binge watch. And it's basically like to me, the way I see it is like a modern day, The Twilight Zone. It's kind of like that, but more modern. And it talks about things that we've been talking about on the show. It talks about artificial intelligence. It talks about that integration with humans and robots and stuff, and kind of a futuristic tone. So if you get a chance to see Black Mirror, I highly recommend it. I haven't seen an episode I didn't like yet. So, but it kind of brings me back to Elon's always on the edge. He's always on the front. He's on the front side of the technology. He was doing electric cars basically here before anybody else was really doing them. He, is constantly creating. He saw an opportunity to buy into social media. He did that right away with Twitter. He's come out against some of the evils that we've seen and that we know are being done on this planet. And I know you just got done saying he's one of us. He's a good guy. He's on our side. I'm wondering, are there other beings maybe just as smart and just as capable as he is, but maybe they haven't surfaced yet? Maybe the world isn't ready for them yet. Or maybe they are. Maybe they're on their way up and we haven't identified those people yet. Do you think that's a possibility? He's not the only one.
Well, there are others. I mean, there are hints and codings that come out there, especially through certain substantial platforms like Twitter and other substantial platforms. I'm sure through Telegram itself, maybe they would pull something out there. But it goes as thus. We need the right types of leaders here. We need the right types of coding effects to move things forward. Otherwise, we're going to keep getting backlash and we're going to keep getting downgraded. There are other elites just as smart, or at least darn well close to Elon, that could motivate techniques for a quantum age. But there are not many that pro-enact through what him and I have and a certain Kennedy to actually putting it together. There are many beings as well out here, including Starseeds, that don't even know how to access the points of events yet and still have that choice or chance to. And this is that time for them to open that up. If you are scared to do it and you have a certain technique, do not be. Move forward with that. There's a reason. This timeline has an open conjuncture for a lot of soul keepers to bring forward a better age. Not just one, not just two. There are numerous amounts of techniques that can be spread out there to motivate many.
Well, one more quick thing on Musk and artificial intelligence and so forth. It's kind of ironic to me that I can't identify as many good people, but I can show you the bad ones. I can tell you who they are. I got a list of them a mile long right off the top of my head. I'm not going to start naming names. I'm not going to start talking about Pelosi and the Bidens and, all the other deep state people. I'm not going to bore us with that. We all know, and we've said it before, and it's well documented. And I want to go on the record that you and I are both in perfectly good mental health. We're not in a depression. So if we get suicided, just saying. I'm just saying. But we're almost out of time here. Let's go right into the alien of the week. ET of the week.
Okay. Well, before we get into that, there is one more thing I want to announce. And
go ahead.
It has to do with Space Force and the activated effects of the White House just recently with the news. They had put out words in the West Wing there about cocaine. Nobody knows where it come from. Nobody freaking knows how it got there, but we all do. And I'm going to announce this right here to you. If you don't pay attention to what the current president is doing and the actual tunnels that they put underground there by the White House and underneath it recently, y'all need to be smacked again in the face. They have added fortification speeds recently down there. They have actual fortification speeds that have been down under that system. You think about both trafficking kids and channeling into event of a negative elemental biomatter. What's this going to cause? These beings have nothing good about them. This is one reason why Elon and others want to establish something around this negative perimeter. The Federation is only going to take so much until we actually make our own physical stance. Drugs, trafficking, violence, all that stuff's got to stop. It's right up underneath their nose if you can't pay attention. The president would never allow chemical byproducts in the White House, and let alone even let it out there if he did. That shows you all right now an eye-opener. Something is not right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's funny because I know I've mentioned it before. Something's been feeling not right for a long time. Feels like I'm in Bizarro world or opposite land, where everything they say do the opposite because, well, everything they're accusing someone else of doing, they're actually projecting what they've done or what they're doing. So it's the whole thing's amazing to me. And I know we could take up another whole show with just that. But if you would, let's go ahead and go back to ET of the week.
Absolutely. The Airlutes, relative of the Surcon, passive, highly intelligent beings. They too possess tails and ridges along the back line. Fast maneuver through running on all fours. They are bipedal as well. Best coatings are debilitated with internal psyche awareness, networking streams, and receiving of commissions upon their platform. Like gray in color, 8 to 8 feet to 9 in length, they also can pull micro-dimensional rifts, which hence certain Force recent affairs had set into acclamation. So if you'd have seen what I had just recently posted, and between that picture and what I just recently posted are very similar to the actual star unit drones that these beings put into polarity score. And higher redox effect that their cousins had maintained stability too. They are more rare species, but they acclimate between Federation and substandard invasion points between them and their cousins as air conduits.
Wow. Interesting characters. Now to be clear, I just want to make sure that I heard correctly. Good guy or bad guy?
They're more neutral, but they're more good neutral. So their substantial reframing code can go in helping other perimeters too, but not negative ones. They are more hyperdimensional retact codes.
Okay. All right. And how about a final word today, Blue?
Well, do your homework, people. Keep up the good work to those souls that want to maintain their light stability. Stay away from genderizing yourself on a bad note of effect. Keep your body the way it is. And to those that have already defamated their own being, that course of event is not going to work very well in the long run. Now, to those that want to use their own mindset right, start making that motivation. We are going into a quantum age. We are going into what you would call a better new world. But we cannot get to that better new world unless we remove the old agenda spheres that they are currently causing. They want a reset acclamation that would cause problems and polarize something outward. And this is another hint out to you all. This is a race fight. Now, the current races of the Alpha Draconan Centaur reptid species that had acclimated themselves upon hologram fortifying speeds, most of them are Central American. Or a lot of these reptilian interwaves, not in the good part, that are cousins to them, go through the lines of, I believe, Asians. So they are, and since Central Americans and Asians, like Central Americans have Asian blood in them, that there's a race fight now between the whites and the blacks to trying to get rid of a euthanization speed on them. So this certain COVID thing coming up this next one would ultimately get rid of the black and white race and save the races of these Central Americans and Asians, because it won't affect them. They had chemicalized it so only it affects those beings. We need to put a stop to this standardized motion. I guarantee you this is going to happen. And if y'all ain't paid attention to the fact that there are more than these beings than there are than the others now, then you should already pay attention that this is going to come along too. We don't want a negative planet. We don't want to pick, point, and polarize at each other. Maybe it's best to transmute our wavelengths into another hologram, and it saved the formulation speeding zones with it, instead of them picking who they want to pick out and polarize their own wavelengths. Because there are, if you look at some of these humanoids, and they are Asian descent or they are Central American descent, I'm not saying all of them. I'm not pointing out fingers here. I'm saying there are beings that have taken on these holograms, not all of them, but there are beings that they have picked what they wanted to pick.
Wow.
Got to deneuralize their standard wave and motivate them elsewhere. Otherwise, when they take over, it's going to become hell on earth completely.
You know,
This is one wake-up call.
I hear this and I'm thinking, two of our big challenges in the world right now we're facing are an influx at the open border from Central America and economically from the Chinese. So I'm finding this mind blowing, and it's crazy that we're talking about these things like that in that capacity. But I can't argue. I couldn't make these stories up. You know, I couldn't make up that we have an open border. I couldn't make any of this stuff up. And I'm not trying to jump in on your last word here, Blue, but it's opened some eyes. And if you do like I do, please go back and listen to the show again. Listen to certain parts of it, because it's almost like when you go see a movie and then you see it again for some reason, you're like, wow, I didn't catch that the first time. Go back and listen again. Tell a friend. Go ahead and click like and subscribe and click on notifications too. But wow. Action-packed show today. Episode 28, Blue, in the books. I'm ready for episode 29. How about you?
Absolutely, Mike.
All right. We'll talk soon. Thank you, Blue.
Yep. Thank you, Mike.